Oh, got to end it with an LFGM or it's not a real Pete Alonso press conference. There's Pete Alonso for the first time since signing his brand new contract with the Mets, a 2-year deal. What's your first impression?
The first thing that it's funny because when he talked about the $30 million thing, I mean, he's counting it as a win. The first thing I thought when I heard it was, is it though? I mean, because he essentially talked about his contract as a bridge to a potential new contract.
Right.
That's the way it was structured, the way that it was. And maybe that's his reality, but from the outside looking in, I don't know if that's the reality. Right? It's a big deal for a first baseman making $30 million a year. Congratulations to him. That's awesome. But the long-term buy-in to him isn't there.
Right.
And so it's good to be back for Met fans, for Pete, for his family, for everyone involved, Steve Cohen, David Stearns, but it still feels temporary to me. That's my takeaway.
It's all temporary. We don't know what next year is going to hold, but the one thing I think he was able to do, unless everyone out there thinks Pete Alonso should win an Oscar, is kind of eliminate the notion that he's bitter, annoyed,
I agree,
angry, and is coming here kicking and screaming. He made very, very clear how stoked he was.
Agreed.
I'm stoked. He said that 12 wtimes. But he also said, were you ever close to joining another team? Like, for example, Pete, were you ever on, let's say, the 10-yard line with another team? Pete said, it's always been this. For me, this is it, was the way he worded it. For me, this is it. So he made it seem, I wanted to be a New York Met. I'm not bitter about it. And he did something else I think was really important. If you go back to last year, and you try to find moments where Met fans were a little disconnected with Pete Alonso, they were disconnected from him before the All-Star break because Pete Alonso was an All-Star and Francisco Lindor was not, and Brandon Nimmo was not. And there were a few Met fans who were pissed off about it. Not that that was Pete's fault, but they were like, dude, this guy hasn't had as good of a year as Lindor, hasn't had that good of a year as Nimmo. And when Pete was asked about it, he talked about how he's had a good year. And I think some Met fans are like, bro, have you? Pete Alonso addressed in this press conference the reality that I know, that you know, and everyone listening knows. He has not had good years the last 2 years. His words, not mine. And I think Pete admitting that and bringing that up as part of why he had a tough time getting a big contract, which is true, I think is important.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to live on delusional island where Pete's like, I don't get it. I was amazing last year. He wasn't amazing last year. He wasn't. And the fact that he addressed that, I thought that was kind of important.
Yeah.
It's like he knows his reality of what's happened over the last couple of years, and he knows what he needs to do this year.
Yeah, it's easy to just lip service your way into making people think that you had a good year, but he didn't have a good year. He knows it. It's the reason that he's in the situation that he's in right now, both with the Mets and the short-term contract that he signed, but also, as one of the other reporters asked, his lack of a market. There's no market for him, right? And he explained it. Came back to the exact same explanation. I didn't have the year that I needed to on a contract season. It's as simple as that. And acknowledging that, I think, it's good for him, but it kind of, I don't know, what does it do for us? I mean, of course he knows, right? Even if people wanted to act like he didn't believe that, he knew it. You know what I mean? He knew that he didn't have a good enough year last year. So it is what it is. I like his honesty. The only thing he struggled with was the whole Steve Cohen thing.
Right. The question was, what was your reaction to Steve Cohen saying at Amazing Day that this process has been exhausting? And he finally found the right answer, which wasn't exhausting for me.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Steve.
I'm not sure how true that one is. I mean, if your livelihood is on the line, where you're going to play, how much money you're going to make, I assume there are moments in which maybe you're a little tired of it and it's a little exhausting. We will come back. We'll get to your phone calls at 888-808-1019, your thoughts on what Pete had to say, plus the other monster news items that are coming out of both Yankee camp and Met camp. Big piece of news items coming out of both Mets camp and Yankees camp are injuries. And that part shouldn't surprise you. Because, spoiler alert, guys get hurt in spring training and it changes everything. So let's start with Giancarlo Stanton. He is dealing with what Aaron Boone said, and Giancarlo confirmed, is tennis elbow. What the hell is tennis elbow, Tiki?
It's just like tendonitis in your elbow. I don't think it's like arthritis, but it probably is the early stages of it. And you just have a stiffness and a soreness and pain, I would assume. This almost feels like he's just trying to take off some spring training days. You remember back in the day when Michael Strahan held out in his last training camp before the Super Bowl in 2007. Like, he just didn't want to go to training camp. I'm old enough. I've done this so many times. I don't need to do this. I'm holding out. Okay, we're good. I'll come back right before the season starts. Now, with Giancarlo, it's probably a lot more than that because he's constantly banged up with one thing or another. Fortunately, it's never been something upper body. It's always been lower body stuff.
It's usually a hamstring pull.
Right, calf, hamstring, maybe a quad here and there. But look, I don't know how damaging or difficult this is going to be for him. But the word is that he had been dealing with this all of last season.
Right.
So it feels like it's something he'll be able to play through. He just doesn't want to do it for a month of spring training.
So the problem is, him having it last year actually concerns me even more because it hasn't gone away. Like,
I don't know if it will, though.
Well, but he even said yesterday he's in big pain. Like, it's not a minor thing. So, yes, he played through it last year, but it doesn't sound like he was playing through this kind of pain.
Yeah.
And if he's dealing with this in the first few days of spring training, it's fair to wonder, is it ever going to go away? Is it something he's just going to have to deal with?
It's probably a chronic injury that's going to just have to deal with via pain meds or whatever the heck it is you're going to play with. It's just it's troubling because the first thing I said when we heard about this is, how did this happen?
Right. What was he doing?
What was he doing? Is he lifting too much weights? Is what's causing the stress to cause this to occur? But apparently it's been something he's dealt with. And even though he said last year, I'm sure he's dealt with it for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he's muscular. He's muscle bound. And you can see it just looking at his arms and his shoulders and his back. Like, he's wound tightly. And that tight musculature, it pulls on your joints. So just, I don't want to say it was inevitable, but it was probably inevitable.
What concerns me about this is that it was last week we were talking about the Yankee lineup and who should lead off and where guys should hit. And when you look at the Yankee roster and you look at their depth chart as of right now, they do not have a margin for error.
Right.
So if Giancarlo Stanton isn't going to be ready for opening day, and we'll hear from Aaron Boone in a minute, where you hear what Aaron said the other day about that prospects, if he's missing considerable time, who's his replacement? Like, literally, look at the Yankee roster, look at their outfield in general, and I'll tell you, they don't have guys who can replace him. Right now, they've got 3 outfielders who are everyday players in Jason Dominguez, who's got a lot to prove, in Aaron Judge and Cody Bellinger. Their 4th outfielder, Trent Grisham, is already dealing with a hamstring issue. Their 5th outfielder, at least on their 40-man, is Everson Pereira. Remember him, big prospect?
Yeah, of course.
He had Tommy John last year. He hasn't taken an at-bat since May. I don't know if the Yankees believe that Everson Pereira is going to be able to help them immediately. That's their outfield depth. We talk about their infield depth. Well, we don't know who their third baseman is. So what makes this, to me, dangerous is that I don't believe they have a lot of depth. And so Giancarlo Stanton, over the last few years, you kind of looked at and said, all right, you know what? If you can get $120, $130 out of him, great. I look at this Yankee roster and I say, I need a hell of a lot more than that.
Well, it makes it even more urgent that the third base situation hasn't been solved and that there's a bat that it seems acquirable that's not been acquired yet.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I've got a list for you.
Go ahead.
You want outfielders that you can get? Because right now, February 17th doesn't sound ideal, but there's actually still free agents out there. Number 1, guy who played in New York, right-hand hitter, fellow by the name of Mark Canha. Mark Canha is begging for a job right now.
Right.
Begging. Now, before anyone just shudders like, Mark Canha, really? Bro, we're on February 17th. Like, it's not as if a Hall of Famer is sitting there in free agency waiting. But you know what Mark Canha is? He's a Major League Baseball player. He can actually suit up and maybe a couple of times a week give you quality at-bats. That's number 1. But I have a second guy. And I'm going to duck as I say the man's name. But he is available. And you guys liked him a lot more than I did. Bring back Alex Verdugo. Chuckle all you want, but I mean, what are the options?
I think we really liked him at the beginning of the season when he was that dog. He was a dude. And he was starting to do some damage.
Right.
And then that all faded.
Yeah. Would you want Verdugo back, Shawnee?
Under the current circumstances, yes. But my fear in Verdugo is Aaron Boone loved him so much that I hope he understands you're bringing Verdugo in here to be the 10th man and not just go, Stanton's back, we got to play him more.
Well, here's the reality. If Stanton's not ready for opening day, who's your opening day DH?
Rice, baby.
Ben Rice, okay, fine. And by the way, Ben Rice could have a big role on this team. He actually can catch. He's actually competing for the backup catcher's role, which is interesting.
Play first base.
He can play first base. You could DH Goldie. Like, absolutely an option. You can play Oswaldo Cabrera at third base, DH DJ LeMahieu. Like, but those are your options. Yeah, they're not great.
It takes a little bit of the pop out of the lineup.
Doesn't it?
That's the problem.
Well, LeMahieu doesn't bring the pop?
Nah.
Here's what Aaron Boone had to say when asked directly. Hey, Aaron, I know it's February 17th. We got a month and a half. Will Giancarlo Stanton be ready for opening day?
I don't know. We'll see. Tough to say. Like, I'm not going to put any timeline on it. We're just going to be smart with it and kind of listen to it a little bit.
And it's both elbows that he has.
Both elbows. Yeah.
You know what that's code for? There's no shot he's going to be ready for opening day. That was Aaron Boone's answer.
Yeah.
That was his answer.
He just didn't want to tell us yet.
He didn't want to be a jerk and say no way, no how, but it's February 17th, and he's already telling you, I don't know.
It's a long-ass season.
It is a long-ass season, but I bet he's frustrated, and that's just – if he sounded frustrated. You very rarely hear him sound frustrated. He's usually very calm, has the answer. He knows exactly what he's going to say, and just the idea of the question pissed him off.
Yeah.
You can tell. I don't know. I got to think about this already. Come on. And it's not even like he's mad at the questioner.
Right.
He's mad at frustrated with Giancarlo Stanton that spring training really hasn't even started yet, and he's already hurt.
But is anybody surprised? And I don't mean that to pick on Giancarlo Stanton. I mean it in general with guys being hurt.
This early, yes.
Oh, come on.
It's surprising.
Yeah, especially to have two elbows, that whole thing. It's not surprising that Giancarlo Stanton is banged up or anything, but we talked about it earlier, the hamstring, stuff like that. To have two tennis elbows, yes, to start camp is surprising.
I'll tell you the difference between Giancarlo today and maybe Giancarlo 2 or 3 years ago. They need him. They need Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
Right.
You look at this Yankee lineup, it's not the same. And that's why I apologize that I used the name Mark Canha and Alex Verdugo. But I'm being real with you. The Yankees right now have 5 outfielders on their 40-man roster. One of them is a prospect coming off Tommy John surgery. The other is a 4th outfielder already dealing with a hamstring issue. And so you're going to need depth. And right now, luckily, the offseason's over, but it's not over.
Right.
Because there's still a handful of guys who are looking for jobs. And don't worry, Met fans, we'll get to you in a few minutes. You're involved in this, too. Like, you look over and say, all right, who can I add? Because right now, they just don't have enough people that kind of give you confidence in this lineup. But we will play the game of guessing when Giancarlo returns. We played that game last year. We're going to play that again here in the middle of February. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but let's get to your calls, 888-808-1019, and also the Mets' big injury that they faced earlier today. Let's go to Mike in New Jersey. What's up, Mike?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
What's up?
Good. So I wanted to shed some light on the tennis elbow. So I've never played tennis in my life, but I was diagnosed with tennis elbow in both my elbows, and I got to tell you, it is very painful.
How do you treat
it? There really is no treatment for it, to be honest with you. Like, when I sleep, I have to sleep with my arms straight out. And, like, during the day, if I'm pushing or pulling something, I feel it in my forearms. I feel it in my arms. Like, it gets bad. And that was 10 years ago I was diagnosed with it, and it hasn't gone away. So...
Wow, so this is a forever thing for Giancarlo Stanton, it feels like.
Well, I mean, it's a forever thing because he dealt with it last year.
Yeah.
The fact he was dealing with it last year, and here we are at the start of spring training, and it's back, and if not back, it's worse than ever. I mean, Stanton himself said he's in excruciating pain. Well, if he's in a lot of pain.
Excruciating pain? That's a bad sign because athletes don't admit to that.
He said he was in major pain. I want to get you the exact word.
Major, whatever it is.
Great movie, by the way.
Major pain. Oh, yeah, that was a pretty good movie.
I heard it's very high level of pain, according to Giancarlo Stanton. I want to get the wording correct.
Athletes don't admit to that ever. And so the fact that he's saying that it's probably worse than that even.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That's why you look at this and it's not your normal, don't worry, it's a few weeks. Because in general, you mentioned, hey, it's spring training. Like Brandon Nimmo, I'll use him as an example. Brandon Nimmo doesn't play the first few weeks of spring training. It's been going on now for a couple of years. And at first, it caused concern, like, where's Nimmo? What's going on?
Right.
It's a part of his routine. A part of his routine on trying to stay healthy through a full season is not exerting himself by playing all these games in early March. And with a position player, especially a guy who's just a DH, all Stanton needs to do is start getting at-bats March 18th in spring training. Give yourself a couple of weeks. You'll be ready to go for the start of the season.
Yep.
Doesn't take that much time, but the problem is, as we sit here today, he's in very high pain. So it's like, well, is it going to go away tomorrow? Is it going to go away a week from now?
And they know how important he is to the ultimate goal of the team and everything he did in October. They're not going to rush this thing. They're just not going to.
Let's go to Ben in Connecticut. How are you, Ben?
How's it going, guys? What a privilege to talk to a couple legends. So thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you, man.
There's only one legend here, and his name is Tiki Barber.
You're WFAN. Legend,
Well, listen, when you grew up like I did, listening to the fan, Evan, you are as well. And
very
for
kind.
me, you and Joe back in the day. So,
Appreciate it.
I wanted to talk about Pete Alonso, and obviously there's no way to defend that last year was like a quintessential Pete Alonso season. It wasn't, for sure. But to defend it a little bit, like I'm the kind of guy I probably watch 100 games a year. I go to like 40 games a year, like you, Evan. But
nice.
The amount of times where a random dog day game in July and August or whatever, and Pete Alonso hit a 3-run homer in the second inning, and we won 6-3, and no one even talked about it ever again. That's where those 35 homers and 90 RBIs came from last year. Like, they were big in the dog days when no one's really paying attention and most people are out barbecuing and whatever. And Pete Alonso's hitting a 3-run homer in the third inning. It's important. And
I'm
how you win games.
I'm glad you said that. I want to pose this to Tiki so he can give an honest answer.
Okay, let's hear it.
About a week ago, I did an entire Rico Bronya in which we analyzed, I'm not kidding, every single home run Pete Alonso hit in 2024. And I told you the situation.
How long was this Rico?
It's about a good hour. I had a good time. But, I'm glad I did it because it relates to our last caller's comment. So we went through every home run. And we said, all right, is that a clutch home run? Is that a whatever home run? Where is it? And what we noticed about Pete, our last caller, spot on. A lot of the home runs he hit last year were important home runs early in games. And so the debate I've had with a lot of the listeners of the Rico is, well, is that a big home run? 0-0 game, first inning, you hit a 2-run home run, you go up 2-0.
Of course it is.
So that's a big home run.
Absolutely it is. You score first, you increase your chance of winning.
So I agree it's an important home run. Mm-hmm. But I think where a lot of Met fans were down on Pete, and it's not just his overall numbers were down, which they were, was that late in games, he wasn't the same player. And it's true. Like, when you think of the big moments through 2024, and I'm not talking about Game 3 against the Brewers, I'm talking about the entire regular season, it wasn't Pete Alonso coming through with big hits. And so I think that's where the feeling, which is mostly true, that he didn't have a great year, it wasn't his most clutch year, comes from. It doesn't mean he didn't hit home runs. He did. And it doesn't mean all of them were meaningless, because that's not true. It just means he didn't have as many of those iconic late game moments as A, he's had in the past, and B, a lot of his teammates did.
Yeah, and again, what does that mean for the Mets? Does that mean that he's not clutch? Does that mean that he's not ever going to come through? The answer is no, because we saw him come through. Right, we saw it in Milwaukee. All right, to put him back into the good graces of the Met fan for 2024 season. So he can do it. Just because he doesn't do it every single moment that it's presented to him doesn't mean that he's a bad player. I think that's where you get caught. You start looking at certain circumstances and situations, and you use it to evaluate his entire career, and that's not fair to him.
Lewis in Short Hills, New Jersey. Good afternoon, Lewis. Hello, Lewis.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I had tennis elbow in both, and actually it was pickleball elbow. Don't laugh. Okay, you can laugh. In both of my arms for more than a year. And I tried a cortisone shot. I tried acupuncture. The only thing that worked, I got PRP injections in both elbows, and it took 3 months. And now I can actually hold a cup of coffee. I literally couldn't hold a cup of coffee. So this is no joke. And as a Mets fan, I'm thinking that we got to trade Starlin Marte for Stroman, even up. You get both guys off each team, and it's a win straight across the board.
It's funny you say that, because earlier today, before the show started, news comes out about Frankie Montas, and we'll get more in-depth than that in a few minutes, and obviously the Stanton stuff. Sean Morash sits in my office, looks into my eyes, and says, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Hey, what's up?" "Mets trying to trade Marte still." I said, "Are you asking me like on the record or my opinion on it?" He's like, I'm curious. Yeah, they trying to trade Marte. And I said, look, I wouldn't trade Starling Marte. I'm big on keeping him, as I've been throughout this offseason, but it did feel like the Mets were very open to moving him, and because they have a lot of outfielders, I can see them moving him. I don't think it's crazy to think that before the start of the year, the Mets are dealing Starling Marte, and Sean pulls a Lewis from a Yankee perspective and says, I'll take Marte for Stroman.
Bang.
I'll tell you why I would not make that trade and what other options the Mets have with Frankie Montas down. I'll give you that in a few minutes. Plus, we'll get back to your calls at 888-808-1019. How concerned should a Yankee fan be about Giancarlo Stanton? And when we come back, how concerned should the Met fan be on Frankie Montas already being hurt? Evan and Tiki on the Fan.